creating the safe space is the most essential to that scenario, because people have been told that it's not safe for them to feel, right? It's not safe for them to feel because of the other person, just like I had explained, like they're whatever, I'm going to make other people feel uncomfortable. And it's in the breath and the me knowing what I'm there to do. I mean, me showing up fully, like ready for all hell to break loose. I'm ready for it. And recognizing that they might not realize that that's what they're walking into, but me being fully prepared for it, just in a calm, neutral state, like I signed up for this. And I'm here to support you through it. It allows the person to just release. It allows them to just do what they actually came there to do, even though consciously they didn't know that they were coming to do that work.
Welcome to another episode of the Limitless Life Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Smith, and if you have not done so, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another podcast. And if you love this podcast and you want some more tips and tricks on how to improve yourself, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There are a ton of instructional videos there. You can find the links down below. However, before you go ahead and do that, I'd like you to stick around for the one, the only Chelsey Hawkings.
What's up?
Hello.
Hello.
Well, Chelsey, the question that I like to kickstart the conversation with is, how do you impact the lives of the people around you?
Ooh. Much like my hat says, I am a free thinker. And so when I am engaging with people, I like to challenge whatever story they're holding. Quite often it will be the one that's keeping them stuck. And I like to kind of just spread a little magic in there and see if you can shift things up and get them moving in a different way. I've been known to say, well, that's a story you're telling yourself. And so that's kind of my tagline with most of my friends. And I also really encourage people to breathe and come back to their center. So those are my two when you first meet me. I think those are the things that you recognize first: the story, situation, and the breath. People will often question, like, well, what, like, is something wrong? Are you stressed? Because I'm very much a breather and I just audibly breathe, and then everybody else breathes and they're like, oh, what's happening here? What are we doing? I'm like, oh yeah, you're breathing. Remember that? That thing. So those are probably the two most influential ways, especially if I'm just meeting somebody.
I like that. What's the interaction often like when you say that's a story you're telling yourself to someone that you have freshly met?
Awkwardness. Not for me. I'm really fantastic at standing in awkwardness. I find it quite interesting and intriguing, and I like to watch people. But their initial reaction is like, this is weird and awkward. And I'm just fine to stand in it. They like to, try and divert, I think, move away from that. But I just follow up with more questions usually, because that's where the magic is in their answers. And I do it in all sorts of circumstances, but because of my food business, I'm often interacting with people in a lot of different venues. And so I look at it as an opportunity to just have fun and see where we go with it. And sometimes it leads to very interesting conversations. Mhm.
I think it's a great question because you can definitely see from that type of a question, it could really split a log where you've split the log down the middle, like it's a heavy duty question, split the log down the middle, and one side of the log is gonna divert as quickly as possible, and then you're gonna have to go chase it down the hill because it's going down the hill so fast. And then there's the other one where it just stays still and is like, oh, that's an interesting reflection, or it could be the first time that they've reflected on a story or they've heard someone acknowledge that story as like, well, that's something you're telling yourself rather than validating what they've said. It's
Mm.
challenging in a little bit of a rebuttal, but in with a well-intentioned delivery.
Yeah, it's more like a fun way. Let's get it. Let's talk about like what's really going on, but in a fun, like lighthearted way, because um people like to just, shoot the shit or small talk it. And I find it very interesting to actually, like, in that moment, in that time, that it might be just a 5-minute conversation to really, like, let's get to know each other for a second. We may never cross paths again, but this is our chance to connect. And I don't want to just connect about something that is the weather. I want to know you. I want to know about you. Some people are down to play, and that's when it's really fun, because it can be really fun interaction. Some people just get all puckered up, and that's an invitation for me to just inquire more, and for them to like recognize, like, oh, what happened here?
Yeah. Where what where did that come from? It's kind of cool because even thinking of the question, or even before I became more aware of the stories I was telling myself, uh, I would very much so want to divert the attention away from the stories, because bringing attention to the stories would force me to face my responsibility. And that responsibility, or the ability to respond, was lacking not that long ago. And
Mm,
that was from me fearing, not even fearing, but me resistant to facing those aspects of myself.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Always a mirror, right? Always bringing it back to yourself. And that was really important for me in my journey, was just taking absolute radical responsibility. Like, what do I really want in my life? And I understand that I get to create it. And it just is that level of making moves and knowing that I'm the one that gets to do it. And so if I can, get people to pause for a second and think about, like, what kind of action are they taking in their own lives? Like, are they a bystander within their life, or are they the ones? Because as soon as that light gets turned on, that's when they get to dramatically shift their lives and do things that they've always wanted to do, and question, like, why am I doing this? Is it because I want to do this, or is this just the story that I've adopted? It's not even my story. It's just somebody's I've collected and started going down that path.
Yeah, and you just kind of go with the flow of it, because there's less people that encourage free thinking. I actually have a thought on this one, where if because philosophy used to be a regular mainstay in, I'm thinking like Stoic philosophy was a
Mhm.
mainstay in schooling at the time. But then, so the thing with philosophy is that it teaches critical thinking. It's questioning your own thoughts and trying to rebuttal your own thoughts in order to validate them, rather than just adopting thoughts. And I think
Mhm.
that if critical thinking was adopted early on, even if a kid was um, encouraged to think, like critically think, or at least seeing the parent or their caregiver critically think, then they would probably be at such a high advantage starting out so early, by being able to like mold the mind and understand things that people unconsciously accept.
Yes. Hmm. That was a huge part of me reclaiming my children. So we unschool our children, and my son did go to school up until halfway through grade 3. And my son was he was an old soul. We bought him a lawnmower at like age 5. Like, he had his own weed eater. Like, he was not a child to sit down and play with toys, and he was just always out there doing things. He wanted to learn. He was very hands on. And when he went to school, I just started seeing his excitement for life and his curiosity and his um just spirit. It was starting to get sucked out of his soul. And we were told that he had a learning disability that they couldn't define.
Mm.
And just remember fighting, being like, he does not have a learning disability. He just doesn't give a shit about what you're teaching him. He's thinking about like his landscaping business at age 5, not like why the duck crossed the street in the
Yeah.
story that you're requiring him to read. And so it was just to recognizing that like I had been under that programming as a child, and I had done all of the things. I had followed the society's blueprint for a great life. Go to school, get straight A's, get scholarships to university, go to university, get out of university, get a good job, that blah 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 blah. And I was like, I did all of those things. I got out and I was like, this is not for me. This is not my life. This is not fun. And it was a path that because growing up as a child was the school kid that did all the assignments, never skipped a day of school, like goody two shoes. But I was also very creative and involved in dance and on stage, and like so thinking out of the box in like lots of different ways and doing things that were really just fun and creative. And at one point, I became the responsible adult, and I went on the path that was, go to university and get the good job. Instead of following my heart that said, go do all those auditions and get a gig and go, travel the world and dance. And it was a period of time where I came back to like, okay, if my son Pierce keeps going down this line, they're going to steal his soul. They're going to take his soul, and he's going to think that this is normal. And it's not, because I'm watching it come out of him. And how can I provide a super beautiful environment for him to just be creative and be critical thinker and question everything, question me. It does circle back to him questioning me, but I'm like, this is what I'm here to help him do, is question all of it and create his own path and not get stuck in the hamster wheel.
I like that. I like how your son is 50 or 5 going on 50
Pretty
with the
much.
lawnmower.
He is an old soul. So he's now 12 and he has
Oh,
his own business.
cool.
He just did his first, well, not his first year of farmers markets and trade shows consistently. And he wrapped up his last Christmas show, made $1,000. He had a goal. He wanted to purchase a ATV from the neighbor, so he paid off his ATV and still had $500 in his pocket. And that's it's instilling in him that he can make anything happen as long as he has the plan, the mind, that all of it is available to him. And in school, they just don't teach that to you.
Something I think is interesting, because there's the projection. A projection is a reflection. And I think hearing the contrast of what your 12-year-old is doing in comparison to other 12-year-olds, and I'm actually more inclined. When I was 12, I was doing a lot of snow shoveling. That was my
Okay.
first entrepreneurial venture.
Yes.
A little bit of an upsell for the sidewalk as well, which they
Mm-hmm.
legally had to do, so there was no choice. And so that's pretty cool. I resonate with that. And I think that's something else that's really kind of important to acknowledge with this story is that what who you are projecting as the character of Chelsey is also being reflected in him as well, in what he's trying to accomplish and what he's doing at the age of 12, when most people are like, oh, I don't even like struggling with
Mm-hmm.
with the things that he's already experiencing. People struggle to even get started.
Absolutely. I see adults struggle to start to put themselves out there, and but I think that's what you learn in traditional school, is not to put yourself out there, to
Totally.
stay safe, to follow the rules, to not ruffle feathers and just go along. And what I really wanted to instill in him, he was always very good at putting himself out there, and I wanted him to continue doing that, because that taking the action is what's going to be necessary to get you where you want to go. And I watch adults who are starting businesses who freak out about a 3-day trade show. They're going to have to go talk to people and interact, and it can be really shell shocking for adults. And I watch him, and he just pops in his booth and he's just there to be himself, though, right? Like he's just already understands who he is. And I think that's something that you lose as you go through the school system is you just little by little you start losing who you are and you just become what they're telling you. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
I forget entirely. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's interesting where you, yeah, you, oh no, this is a different one. But yeah, it's interesting that there's such an emphasis and focus on going through a system repeatedly over and over and over again when there's the evidence that it has not served many other people.
Mm,
And I think that
absolutely.
I think that learning the style of learning, like where people learn the best, creates a faster reciprocation in what an individual can give as well. So I'm much
Mm-hmm.
better with observing, critical thinking, and doing. So if I had like a superpower, it would be watching and implementation, and I can pick it up pretty quick, which YouTube is the best.
Yes.
Because I'm
Yeah.
better with that compared to if it was a textbook and I was reading things and I couldn't quite visualize or connect the things that I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being able to foster that creativity and not dampen it is uh, a superpower, almost a superpower in itself. When every all the discomforts that we experience have been or could be or will be eventually uh, solved through the process of creativity. It's creativity that solves for discomfort.
Absolutely.
So it's like, okay, I don't have socks. My feet are cold. I guess I could create socks. Or the first
Mm-hmm.
time that anything was ever created was to resolve some form of discomfort. And I
Absolutely.
think when that curiosity is pushed down and it's not flourishing, then we do not develop the cognitive space to be able to think, oh, I don't like this part of my being. I don't like this part of my life. What are some creative ways that I can kind of get myself out of that situation?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's the design of the system, right? To create people who don't think, whose creativity have has been dampened, like suppressed, so that when they create the problem, let's say the government, whoever it is, can provide the solution and people just easily adopt it
Mhm.
because they're just they're so consumed with everything else and their creativity has just been like smothered. And so it's hard for them to think of how to get themselves out of it. And that's where most people just stay stuck on the in the rat race or on the hamster wheel and they're miserable. But if they just, went out to nature and allowed themselves to breathe and, get creative, connect back to themselves, then they could sort out a solution that
Right?
wasn't from somebody else, but was from within.
Yeah, we often already know the solutions to the problems we're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's cool. So before we were chatting, I'm going to go with this question I wrote down because I think it'd be fun. Before we were chatting or before we started recording, uh, you reference universe a lot, and I quite like that because I think that um, we are of a universe of a one song,
Mm-hmm.
or we are one sum. So we are the one of some. Like there's many, but there's also singular.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from the macrocosm to the microcosm, from small to big, I think that we are just different representations of the same sort of systems.
Mm-hmm.
So a question that popped up that I want to ask you is what does practical application of the universe look like to you?
Ooh. When we all come back to the understanding that we are all one, that is how everything comes back together. That is how we heal the earth. When we're looking at each other and we understand that we are so divinely connected, energetically, the fact that we're all here at this time, there's nothing that separates us, and everything that is separation has been designed to keep us fighting. so that we can't come back to that realization, to come back to that knowing that the way that we create the most beautiful experience on earth is when we all come together. And because we are all one, we are all created out of the same fabric of nature. And so it's in recognizing that we get to remind each other that that's what we're here to do, come back together. And everything that's been implemented has been designed to keep us from doing that. But there's a remembering happening for people, and I'm watching it happen, and like their lights getting turned back on. And when their light gets turned back on, they see your light, and it's like you had mentioned earlier, like the lighthouse, and then all of the lights come together. It's just a knowing that we're all here together for a reason, and anything that's been told, the story that's been told that we're separate, is a lie.
Agreed. It's conceptual separation. That's what came to mind when you through that. Yeah, without a doubt. There was I think I shared this a couple times on this podcast, but there's a book called Sapiens, and it goes into what really separates individuals. What is it that separates human beings? And the common denominator, what it all really came down to, is our beliefs or the banners or the flags that we wave. Like you can have, this is an interesting example, and they actually observed it, where you can have someone from Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, or Ireland, and they don't get along. However, if you put them into a bar in North America where it's going to get rowdy, suddenly they're going to be besties because they still know that they know each other better than they know the other people, even though when they're back home, they actually don't like each other. So that's the layers of what actually separates people. And that's this conceptual separation of the banners that we are bound to.
It's the story. It's the stories that we were given, right? And we watched it play out hugely. I mean, we've watched it play out throughout history over and over and over again, depending on various whatever criteria, but like just the most recent for within this time period. We watched it play out within COVID. We watched it play out where they just separated people, because if we had the chance to come together, they did it physically, right? Energetically, they separated us 6 feet apart so that we couldn't feel each other's energy, because there's something magic that happens when you are with somebody. You're energetically exchanging all the time, even though you don't maybe think you are. And so we watched it happen on so many levels, in different ways, different tests, of just separating people. And it could be just because, this person's wearing a mask, this person's not, this person's, doing this experiment, this person's not, this person won't stand on the dot, and this person will. Like, it was like so many different levels of separation. And just watching it play out, how quickly stories will be adopted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How is it that how is it that just pondering this one. How is it that you listen to that'll be simple. How is it that you listen to your intuition?
Ooh. How is it that I listen to my intuition? It's just me. It's just my knowing. It's just, every time I've listened to it, it's been right. And there's like certain moments that I could feel it. My body just knew that, like, I recognized, like, saved my life. And it was compounding interest. So every time I listened, I was like, oh yeah, no, that was right. And then it was the evidence to keep me on that path of listening, because my body just, like, everything in me just knows. And I'll never forget, I had this, my daughter was about a year and a half or so, and it was dark, and we had just pulled over to a rest stop because she was hungry, she was freaking out. We were in the car. So we pulled over to this rest stop, and I was feeding her, and I was feeding her in her car seat. So the door, like the slider was open, and I didn't recognize that there was this gentleman in another car at the rest stop, like a little further down from me, had been watching us the whole time. And I would say it was like maybe like 6 o'clock, like we're on our way home. My husband's waiting for us to get home. And so I finished feeding my daughter, and that's when at that point I kind of like recognized that there's this guy sitting in this car, and he was watching me. And but I really had to go to the washroom. And so the rest stop, the washroom was like down a hill, like quite far from the car, and like wooded, treed. And I was like, oh man, I was about 10 minutes from home. I'm like, I really have to go to the washroom. I'm just gonna go. But I had this feeling, like, I don't know, this guy, something about it is off. And so I grabbed my daughter and I raced down to the washroom, and I walked into the washroom, and everything in my gut was like, get out of this washroom. You got to get out of this washroom. And I opened every door, like every stall. And I'm like, nope. My daughter's like following me around. I looked in every stall, and then my gut was like, get the fuck out of the washroom. And I picked up my daughter, and I started walking up the hill. And it was like we had just passed each other. I was coming out of the door, and he was just coming down. And there was just like this exchange of like a look, an exchange. And I booked it up to the car and just got back in the car and did not go to the washroom. And I just had this feeling and knowing, like my whole body was screaming at me to leave. And I could have let my logical mind be like, it's nothing, you're just making a big deal out of this. But like I couldn't explain it. And was an experience that stuck with me like every time I pass that rest stop, I'm like, I just know that I should not stay there. And that's what I come back to every time when I get that feeling in my body, and I'm like, nope, like this is my innate knowing, like divinely guided. We're given all of the tools to sense all of that. Why do we get goosebumps on our arms? Like we're given all of these tools that we've forgotten, that help us to survive, that help us to tune into the environment.
I like that. Great share. Great share.
Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes it's good to listen to that intuition, listen to those vibes, and really try not to ignore it or shut it down. Because the other end of it, where you're not listening to it, I think that when you have that intuitive pull, it works like that compass towards a North Star. And when we decide to not listen to that intuitive pull that has our best interest at heart, then that's when we experience a lot of the dis-ease of existence, where it's our intuition knowing at an unconscious level that we are not in a state or a place that we wish to be in, and then we're choosing to stay in that space. And then we wonder, why are things getting shitty? Why do I feel so yucky? Why is it that I just feel this sensation in my stomach, this knot in my stomach that won't go away?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because you're not listening to the intuition.
Mm-hmm.
You're not listening to the words or you're not listening to what is trying to be transferred to you, the knowledge that is trying to be transferred to you through physiological feels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a disconnection within yourself, just total disconnection, because your body is always working for you, right? And we've been told like our logical mind, we should let our logical mind decide, but it can tell us all sorts of stories. And your body is always working. It's always working to heal you. It's always got your best interest at heart. But I think that's a huge sign that like we've also become disconnected in terms of our bodies by suppressing our symptoms, right? That's literally what our world has decided is the way to deal with our bodies, is suppress the symptoms. Don't get to the root cause, but your symptom is your body telling you, it's signaling to you that there's needs to be attention here. And I think that has aided in people becoming disconnected to their body. And when you're disconnected to your body, you can't possibly be connected to your intuition because you're a system, right? It's like they take you all apart and say like this is this and this is this, and you're all separate, but you're a beautiful system that's so interconnected. You can't separate yourself like that.
Totally. I think of it like I think many folks believe or think, or at least for myself, having the story that there was only one individual, being me. However, I've recognized over time that there is more of a council where it has that physiological feels. Then you have the conscious. Then so I break it up where it's you have the human being, the animal being, and the unconscious being, or the higher being.
Mm.
And then it's actually a council of threes. It's not just me speaking to you. It's also my unconscious, my subconscious, the conscious. And it's interesting understanding how each of those kind of play a role in what every living creature desires, and that's survival.
Mm.
And it's interesting that we're probably the only animals that can consciously prevent ourselves from prioritizing survival because we're living in such an abundant environment that our survival is no longer as physical, but is much more conceptual.
Mm-hmm.
It's survival of the mind.
Absolutely.
And I think it's interesting where it's like there's such a focus on the mind, but there's less of a focus on the body and being in the body. And it's like, how is it that it feels like just being aware of things? Like, uh, who was it that had this one? It wasn't James. It was Todd. It was Todd yesterday. I had a podcast with him and he was talking about the feels, like just feeling where you're sitting. I feel that I'm sitting on a chair. It's wooden. I feel the plush blanket that's underneath me. I feel the wood that my desk or that is made of my desk or that my desk is made of. I see like feeling the things that are in your environment is so simple, but I didn't really think of it or think of it as an act of participation or until he mentioned it and reminded that. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes so much more sense. But if we don't have that sense of feel outside of ourselves, then how can we have that sense of feel within ourselves?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like another layer of disconnection, right? Where we've it's just we're more disconnected than we've ever been before. And like where you had talked about like survival, you used to have to think about how are you going to survive, but now it's where our attention has been hijacked and we don't have to think about that anymore. So our attention has been hijacked and now we're thinking about things that have nothing to do with our survival, but it's distraction. And it just further and further disconnects the person from everything. Their whole system becomes disconnected. And then you're talking to somebody and they don't even remember how to feel. What is feeling? What is feeling? What is feeling? Right? Suppressing, distracting, like that's what's become regular. Um, I had experienced it when people just don't know what to do with it because they are so disconnected with themselves. I was at a farmer's market and I found out that my grandmother had just passed away, and everyone was like, "Oh, Chelsey, why don't you just pack everything up and leave?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna be this way wherever I am. How I'm feeling right now is how I am. So I could pack up and go through the hassle of like chucking everything out in the middle of a market while I'm upset. Or I could just stand here in my feelings and I'm fine with it. It doesn't bother me. I don't feel like I have to hide how I'm feeling right now. This is just how I am. But everybody else is going to get to decide how they deal with it. And it was for like 3 hours. So here I am a puddle and it just is. And that's fine. But we've all become so like, ooh, we don't show that. We hide that away. Oh, don't you want to, Chelsey, don't you just want to hide yourself away? And I'm like, actually, no, because this is how I am. This is how I'm feeling right now. You want me to hide myself away because you don't know what to do with my feelings. You don't have to do anything with them. You can just be. But that's where we've become disconnected. People don't know how to just be with each other as they're feeling.
Mm.
And think about how wild that is, that we're all these humans can't be with each other as they're feeling. It's so strange. And so I just was like, oh, I'm just gonna stay here and figure it out. And that'll help me because I'll be able to actually process my feelings right now in real time. I'll just be able to be. And then later, in 4 hours, I'll be able to pack up and I'll probably have my shit together a bit more. And I won't be a blubbering mess trying to chuck all of my stuff into my vehicle in the middle of a market. And it was just an interesting experience because I just told everybody. And I was like, you can come buy my stuff still. Like, fine, I'm here. And they're like, well, what's wrong with you? I'm like, well, my grandmother just passed away. Oh my gosh, why are you still here? I'm like, because this is how I am right now. And it just is.
That is an
Yeah.
interesting. I like that that your observation of uh uh them possibly wanting to for you to hide how you feel from them because they don't know how to adjust themselves or be there. And I think that hiding away aspect is very, very accurate because when you said that, then I started thinking back on how often is it that, or I asked myself the question, how often is it that when connection could have been a stronger source of strength, but I chose disconnection because of a desire to not make other people uncomfortable.
Mm. Hmm.
That's a neat observation. So I'm thinking that it's like, oh, so if I find myself, or when I find myself, either or in a situation where it's like, because I'm very okay with being solo, but perhaps depending on the degree or the context of the situation, I can flip that and actually be more connected rather than disconnected. And that way, that would work out actually better, probably to uh, increase the speed of accelerated healing.
Mm. Right. Because every time you push your feelings down, like had I left, I would be suppressing my instincts to just feel. I'd be suppressing it and telling my body, this isn't the time to feel this right now. You need to go do this by yourself in your car on your drive home or whatever, right? Instead of just being human and feeling it and letting my body process it. It wants to do it right then and there and it knows the way to do it, right? And just recognizing that like I'm totally fine. It doesn't This is the best way I can support myself is by feeling my feelings in real time right now and allowing myself to move through it. What it's going to require of everybody else is that they're going to have to take a look at what their story is in supporting somebody when they're feeling things. And that I think that the biggest part in there is that what is my feelings going to trigger within them, and that requires a certain level of like self-awareness and trust that they can also feel the things. If I'm upset and I just told them, like my grandmother died, and it triggers their feelings of when their grandmother died, like that is okay. And can they process that because it's surfacing for a reason? Did they fully process it to its full extent when it happened, or did they suppress it and tell themselves they are going to feel that later? Sometime
Totally.
later because it's not appropriate right now.
It's not kind of neat. So I think the part that you hit on about suppressing it until experiencing it later. And I had a thought where I was trying to think of a trajectory. So this is kind of like the visual that popped up, but our emotional body is not limited to the same rules of time that we abide by.
Mm.
So by not, I'm just looking at it of handling it then compared to the alternate where it would be handling it later. Handling it then allowed the body to release those feels rather than having to suppress them. And possibly in between thinking, I'm going to suppress this and when you eventually process it, some good things could have happened through that point in time too.
Mm.
And then you may, or someone, I'm just kind of like spitballing
Right.
ideas,
Mhm.
but then someone could suppress it and then forget about it, but they're still holding on to that while still enjoying something else that's going on. And then eventually it loops back around. And then at that point, people are like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And they're
Right.
like completely caught off guard. But it's when you reflect on it, it's like, what was it that I did not process? I should go revisit that, process it, and then the emotional body doesn't have to hold on to that anymore.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's always going to be stored in the body. If you don't, if you, it's like when you watch animals out in the wild, they process that right there, real time. That's happening. But for us, because of whatever the story is that society has created, that you're not supposed to be emotional or whatever it is, we tuck it away. I always talk about this with like my clients. Is it shoved way down in your big toe, right at the very end of your big toe? Did you put it there? It's going to come back to you. It's going to resurface if you don't process it. Whatever you shoved into your big toe is coming up, and you don't know when it's going to come up. Then it's like you said, like, oh my gosh, what's going on? This is like a crisis because you're not expecting it to resurface. Whereas if you just process it in real time when it's happening, your body goes back to nature and it does what it's supposed to do, and it allows you to release it. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have more releasing later down the line with whatever, the trauma is or the circumstance, but it's that's following nature's path. Your body knows what to do to process it. It's in the suppression of it, tucking it way down into the bottom toe. That's really what I work on a lot with my clients on, like through breath and story work, is that you think that you're coming. A lot of times they come to me. I just did a session actually last week, and she was like, this is not what I came here for. And I'm like, but it is. I'm like, it is, because the thing that we were just talking about is connected to this thing way back here. And it's just, it hasn't been worked through yet. And as soon as you work through that and you allow your body to release that, then you open up everything else. All the channels get opened up and you're clear again. And until then, you're holding stuck energy, and it's asking for you to release it. That's all. Your body's just saying, please let me let go of this. I don't want to carry it anymore.
Mm, that's great. I'm grateful for that share. Uh, when when you're taking on a client
Mhm.
and when you're empowering them to feel,
Mm.
how is it that, and of course it would change per person, but how what kind of ways of connection have you felt had the most potent return on effort?
Mm. Creating the safe space is the most essential to that scenario, because people have been told that it's not safe for them to feel, right? It's not safe for them to feel because of the other person, just like I had explained, like they're whatever, I'm going to make other people feel uncomfortable. And it's in the breath and the me knowing what I'm there to do. I mean, me showing up fully, like ready for all hell to break loose. I'm ready for it. And recognizing that they might not realize that that's what they're walking into, but me being fully prepared for it, just in a calm, neutral state, like I signed up for this. And I'm here to support you through it. It allows the person to just release. It allows them to just do what they actually came there to do, even though consciously they didn't know that they're coming to do that work. Subconsciously, they know they're coming to do that work. And just receiving for the person, just being there and not having any expectations. I'm there to support them and allow them to release whatever they need to release, that their body knows. Their body always
Mm.
knows. And I often get the comment like, this is not what I signed up for. And like, this is great. Like, well, perfect. This is what you signed up for, though, underlying way deep down, you knew.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's just being the safe space for people to feel, because a lot of people do not have a safe space where they can just feel their shit, feel through it. And they never expect that they're going to feel when they come into the session.
Right. How do your clients pull that safe space into the rest of their world when you're not around?
Through the words that we work on and their breath. One of the most important things, I think, like the foundation is the breath, because if you can learn to self-regulate, then you have the ability to come back to the words conscious, right? So as soon as you can get a hold of your breath, so I really talk to them a lot about their breath. How can they come back to it? Practicing, just simple techniques of just connecting back to themselves so that they can ground themselves. And then it's allows them the space to come back to the words that we work on and the word and the story that they're holding for themselves.
Beautiful. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I got one preemptive question before the final two, and that is there anything that has to be said that hasn't been said yet?
Ooh. I mean, it could go in all sorts of directions. There's so much to talk about in this out in the wild, out in this wild world. Um, I don't know. I'm gonna ask you, I'm gonna flip that back onto you, Kyle.
Is there anything that has to be said that hasn't been said yet? Hmm. In context of our conversation today,
Mhm.
something that could be said is that there is not a singular route to a specific outcome, but
Mm,
there are multiple routes to a desired outcome. And
absolutely.
although most folks may believe that it's an A to B, it could be an A to whatever other location and then loop around to the same opportunity.
Absolutely.
So things don't need to be convergent, they can be divergent and still hit the same spot.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, the divergent one can take you on such a fun journey.
Totally. It's the scenic route.
It's you're picking up all the skills, you're picking up all the tools along the way to get you to the beat.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
They're side quests to develop skills of the game of life.
Exactly. Exactly.
Cool. All right, final questions. Final questions on this one. Set in the context. You're on your deathbed. It's the end of your days. You're surrounded by the people that you love and care for. What piece of advice do you want to pass on before you kick the bucket? No content exists as well.
I've already passed on all of it by that point.
Fair.
No, it's already in their hearts. It's already
Cool.
there. Yeah. I've done all my work at that point. It's already instilled in them. Hmm.
Nice. So
Hmm.
what would the experience be like that you envision? Now I'm curious on that.
Ooh,
That's
just
not the last question. I'm just curious.
on my deathbed?
Yeah, like when you envision yourself at that point in time,
Oh,
and if there's no advice being given, what is it that you're experiencing?
we're just all breathing together. I think we're all just sitting. We're just in each other's energy.
Cool.
Hmm.
I like
Hmm.
that. The Now is the final question.
Okay.
The best version of you
Mm.
is sitting next to you right now. What piece of advice does she have to give you for this season of your life?
She's already given it to me many a time. Uh, it's just keep going, keep persisting, keep persevering. Um, through I've learned that over and over again that I hold the vision and then it becomes mine. And so it's just that reminder that like keep holding the vision, keep doing the work, and eventually everything will come in.
Love it.
Mhm.
Absolutely love it. Well, folks, That is what I got for you in today's episode. Where can people find you, Chelsey?
Oh, they can find me on Instagram at Simply Living and Thriving.
Excellent. And
Mhm.
folks, if you love today's episode, please do me a favor right now. Take a screenshot, share it on your Instagram stories, and tag me with my handle at DapperDudeKyle, along with at Simply Living and Thriving. That is one of the ways that we grow. And until next time, keep up the kindness, and I hope your day treats you as good as you look.